of the Joint Intelligence Operations Center. I also brought my fan club, a couple of soldiers here, so they're the ones that deserve the claps. Oh, by the way, the work that Victor was talking about, they're the real impetus for our fight to make sure that Russia stays at bay. So if you can thank these fellow service members, they absolutely deserve a hearty pat on the back because they've been working nonstop ever since well before February to make sure that not only Ukraine stays safe, but our critical infrastructure and our network stays safe as well. So I had the blessed opportunity to work at United States Cyber Command. Prior to that, I worked in the Pentagon, had a stint at the Central Intelligence Agency, and even before that, I kind of meandered back and forth in the military intelligence community. But most recently, I've kind of taken on that torch to help grow the field of cybersecurity to involve more people because we have so many openings and not enough people rushing towards those job openings. So how can we kind of grow the field has been a big part of what I've tried to do on my limited free time outside of
limited free time, and then time just stretches for candidates. So I don't know how you do this with your day job, but I think the last few months, we have met, and it's like everywhere. Looking for more cyber workers, both in the force, outside the force. So, what's the motivation? In essence, we have gone through the military ranks, and now in leadership positions several years. And how do you see someone grow in that space? What do they enter? What would a career look like? And why should our young men and women join that cyber?
Absolutely. I think the motivation that really got me into this is because I had started years ago when I left the military academy and was in the esteemed 82nd Airborne and realized there were so many jobs that were prohibited for women to go into. And I figured you're actually cutting out 50% of your country and those people that are dedicated to do this work. Why would you do that to yourself? And so when I entered the cyber workforce, I saw kind of a similar trend, where if you look back statistically about the early 2010s, it was about 10, 11% women. And that is a big gap that I said, we can absolutely fill. I've seen the military do it in less than a decade. We are now up to 25% of the work. To come on board. And that's the biggest part of kind of inviting people into this huge tent with so many different opportunities. There is a place for you in cybersecurity or even in the tech field. And by kind of opening that door, especially with the military background and things that I've seen come through, we have the possibility to understand, especially younger generations, whether it's middle school, high school, and even in college, to maneuver into this space.
Absolutely, and I remember the 50,000 certification. You might be a few more. So, Candice, you made a couple of weeks back just about talking about how can you make the leaders aware of, in the private sector of the requirement, which is a really nice term. I picked up. I had this requirement from our other friends, and Chow said.
Use and even those listening over the internet, understand that there are points in your life where you just have to step back. You can't stay on the bullet train, and especially in cybersecurity, it's an intensive field. It's tough. It's not easy every day to face the threats that we do and the ever-growing nature of this environment we're in. So
this is an area where we should encourage people who have dabbled in this field in the past to come back under the tent, to come back to work in this field, because there are so many opportunities. I get to a point, I have 2 teenagers right now, where they want me to leave the house. They know not only do they not overneed, they just like, get out the door, mom. So that's a great opportunity when we look at inviting people back under the tent, come back into this field. We can, if you've already had those skills before, field much more at an advantageous nature of leaning forward, because we need
Absolutely.
all sorts of ages and all sorts of backgrounds.
I think we talk about diversity, right? And diversity is in thought, culture, how you orient it. I mean, all of that is open, right? The door is wide open, and that opportunity, I think, is what you're talking about,
Absolutely.
right? The other thing that I wanted to delve into a little bit about was it's one of Val's curveballs. No, just kidding. How do we orient people? Like there is two. One, we want to definitely have a military career in cyber, which should start early. But then also there is when they're trying to get out and I mean the private life, those discipline that our armed forces have, and especially cybercom in terms of, so how can we apply that and embrace that in the industry?
So I think the biggest part that industry can do is there are so many opportunities, whether it's Skill Bridge, Hire Our Heroes, different types of sponsorship and mentorship programs that exist that are absolutely both free to industry and free to the service members. Encouraging and leaning into those, but understanding service members just have a penchant to understand security.
Yeah.
It's baked in. You don't have to train them about understanding offensive and defensive operations. They've done this physically. And so in a different environment, cyberspace itself, why wouldn't you want to hire an already pre-baked or, already ready population that's out there? Service members also that are in the National Guard and Reserves, they can go back and forth to their unit, and they're a total asset to what you do, especially our cyberspace individuals that will train either on the weekends and just once or twice a year. They can work in your organizations, and boy, did they bring it back to our military forces as well, the information that they learn and what they do in their civilian jobs. Mm-hmm. There's it's really dual purposed, and Absolutely. It's great for our organization. But those transitioning service members are the ones I definitely like to reach out to. We, unfortunately, in the military, have a very, sadly, compared to our civilian counterparts, a high suicide rate. And I think sometimes because service members have a mission, when they're in uniform, they understand this is what I'm up against. This is what I'm doing for the collective. The cyberspace community has the same thing. Most of us in this room right now are mission-driven people. Yeah. We do this, the money is good in this field, but also we do it because collectively we understand there is a threat out there to our infrastructure, to our nation, and we are pre-baked with mission in mind. Let's bring those service members into your organizations because they are thinking that way already.
Absolutely. And it's a career or a lifelong learning that they bring. It's relatively easy to teach skills like technical skills, but those skills I think are hard, right? You're either born with them or you have to grow with them. And I think that's what you're highlighting.
Absolutely.
Right? Candice, what about when they transition, and I think you're looking at both options in inside growth in the forces and then outside in the private sector. What do you think kind of the jobs that they would be really good for and be looking for, right? Because this journey starts when they're already in, right? I mean,
right. I think the journey starts when they're already in, and so that's encouraging. Especially we do this with Net Plus, Security Plus, those baseline certifications that. The budget for even our own military, they have a certain amount that they can get and paid for by the Department of Defense. Mm-hmm. That's a great start. So encouraging certifications while you're still in the service. Mm-hmm. Recruiting and going to job fairs, sometimes you have to go to them. They don't have the opportunity, bigger bases, let's say in Texas right here, Fort Hood would be an optimal place for companies and organizations to go when they have hiring events. And talk to some of the service members who may be a year out and ask them, hey, why don't you start looking at these opportunities, whether it's through your company organization and website, to start getting ready for that transition, and then they can come to you already ready with certifications in hand, and you can continue to increase their knowledge in whatever area your business is focused on.
That's great to know. For a city like military city, San Antonio, now cyber military city, you can make all this, look really. I mean, maybe it's very natural. How do we get like big hubs to participate? Like, I've been Dallas and other places where I don't think we pay that much attention. We're like all busy with our on the business side, on the commercial side. But what I see here in San Antonio is a great model that can be in any other place, right?
I think it's just showing, I mean, business people understand return on investment.
Yeah.
And so if you're willing to reach out and go to communities like San Antonio or other large areas that have a healthy military population, you're going to have a great return on investment, especially with the number of jobs now that you don't physically have to be in office, that kind of hybrid approach. Military members definitely understand, and they're starting to get used to this change in environment as well. I think there are opportunities. You just sometimes have to go to them.
And absolutely. And I think, that engagement that you mentioned, that while they're in the base, and you visit them and get them, acquainted with the opportunities, I think it's important. What do you think about cybersecurity now, if you have to look at the different functions and domains, where would be a good starting point? And I'm talking about, like, there's definitely, security operations center, which, and threat analytics, all those areas, they're built into their job.
Right. So Security Operations Center, those who may not, when we think of like people that are forward leaning, whether it's infantry, artillery, they understand, hey, high tempo, high paced environments. When you're looking larger with respect to threat, there's a huge amount in number, whether it's in the Navy of cryptologists or in the Army of military intelligence, and same thing with the Air Force. Those people that have already been working on intelligence, and they have intelligence in mind and understanding where they're looking for and searching for threat vectors, understanding analysis in totality. They have been trained, and the military has poured a significant amount of money in them to train them to look for certain things. Those are already, you bring them for free when you hire them into your organization. I think those are areas. There are certain hubs as well. Not a lot of cybersecurity companies are tramping down to Fort Huachuca, Arizona for the Army, but what a tremendous opportunity that location is with respect to understanding threat intelligence.
Yeah, no, I think that the mindset is already there, and I think it's the application, turning from the military to the civilian world. But we face kind of the same threats now, right? What is your orientation in terms of now you have seen both the worlds. Little bit of maybe U.S. Cybercom insight into what private sector should look for and apply those military veterans into.
I think one great area that we have definitely invested in is understanding open source. The public-private partnership is absolutely critical now. We cannot do our mission, although we are very fortunate for Cyber Command to work with the National Security Agency. We are dual-hatted under General Nakasone. So we work very tightly and closely together. But that open partnership with respect to the whole of government approach to what we're doing with working with the FBI, CISA, and other agencies and organizations, we are tightly interwoven together to understand what the threat landscape looks like right now. But that can't be done without the public companies and organizations that are out there either tipping and queuing or alerting the cyber community in totality of what threats we're facing, because it's so dynamic and it changes quite rapidly.
And maybe you can expand a little bit on your role in the job right there. I think that there is definitely a need to expand the workforce to actually get the job done, but also how does is there any sharing that you can talk about that goes on? You said about public-private partnership, and then with FBI, I think the private sector is very familiar and works with, but U.S. Cybercom, does it contribute to the same ecosystem?
U.S. Cybercom works specifically. We have certain locations. One is in Dreamport, it's in Maryland, and we try and host events that not only work to grow our workforce. There was one a couple of weekends ago that targeted high school students, and many of the kind of hack the, you name it, infrastructure, network, neighborhood, vending machines, you name it, those kind of operations and organizations that are out there that are trying to kind of get the youth into this field. But on another side, with respect to businesses, Dreamport is an opportunity and location where small and medium-sized businesses can work together with Cyber Command. And I know Mr. Mike Clark will be your next speaker. He could definitely dive into this a bit more.
Absolutely. And then following his remarks last night, we are looking forward to see how that threads into how can the private public sector work together. Now it's a common mission. It has always been. I think the recognition is very recent, right? That we have to share and we have to work towards the same common goal.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
the threat's just too large now.
It is
And I
true.
think, whereas we have a very focused mission on defense of the Department of Information, or Department of Defense Information Network, and some of the critical infrastructure, that's 2/3 of our mission. Just 1/3 is the hunt forward or offensive operations that are conducted. But it takes a whole of nation approach to really understand persistent engagement in what we do.
Yeah. Well, I think the distribution is fairly, looks fairly simple, but I'm sure there is a lot of cross. One thing, I always think in mind, like when it compares the physical world, I mean, hope never happens, but a missile falls on a Target or a Walmart store. Okay, I mean, who's going to defend that airspace? It's going to be on the defense side, but that happens every day
Right.
on the cyberspace, right? It's just not visible. I think that's the common person's doesn't really recognize that happens. So is there something that you can talk about, that how your organization's role is to protect that space?
I think we work hand in hand with CISA and some of the work that they do to try and alert organizations and companies through different alerts that they put forward and information that they share. Less so what we do, we are very focused on threat actors external to the country because we're Department of Defense. They're much more inclined to work with either FBI, Department of Justice, Department of Treasury,
Right.
and Department of Energy as well, to stay very focused. Some of the best organizational, I guess, pamphlets we could say, or things that are written, I think CISA has put out recently to try and alert different companies what they're facing.
Absolutely, and I think that knowledge helps both the common public as well as those that are defending in this space. So, we're trying to close this out, and let me ask you, if there was, a genie could ask a wish for fulfillment, this whole cyber capacity thing, what would we ask?
So if we were to really have like the 3 wishes, first wish would be infinite wishes. There you go. So I can knock that out of the park. And then I would really go to, how are we working forward for each of us to recruit? I think, especially those in this room and those who are listening, we are a part of our legacy. We build our own bench. And I'd ask, I'm a really big proponent of both sponsorship and mentoring. And in this space, it's incredibly hard to not only walk into this space,
Yeah.
but also stay and retain and understand, kind of leaning forward with respect to what's next. So those of you who are already knee-deep in cybersecurity, I would just say, look in the mirror and say, who have I tried to recruit in to replace me, number 1, because you've constantly got to grow the field. And number 2, how do I build the bench so that I have a lasting legacy? I think a big part of cybersecurity and bringing more people in is if we would realize that you've got to have that secondary, tertiary person on the bench. If you think like a sports team, who are those people, if you're injured, that can just step into your role and your position?
Sure.
And every day, if we're building in that way, in that method, you're building a legacy. And that legacy is incredibly important, because then we'll build a much larger community if people say, I want to be like that person.
Sure.
I walk like them, talk like them, I look like them. That's great. But you've got to sponsor and mentor people who are not Xerox copies of you. Reach out, find a way to mentor and sponsor people into your organizations. And even if it's not your company, offering them opportunities in different areas, I think it pays off in dividends.
Absolutely does, and that is something to wish for. So again, fantastic, thoughts, great insights. Candice, always great talking to you, and love the work that you're doing, and hopefully all of us can support the work in expanding cyber workforce on both sides of the defensive side as well as the commercial side. So please welcome and thank you, my friend here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we'll switch into the next.